Hello and welcome to Better Under Pressure. I'm Sara Milne Rowe, author of The Shed Method and founder of Coaching Impact. And in this podcast, I talk to leaders from all walks of life about being better under pressure and using pressure for better. I want to explore how we handle pressure in a world that is becoming more and more complex, the impact that pressure has on our ability to perform at our best, and what we do to be better under pressure.
Because we'd been working all night, I would just be sleeping at random hours. So it was middle of the day and I went home after that meeting and I took a little nap and I couldn't get out of bed. I physically couldn't get out of bed to go back to the studio. I just thought, we're not going to make it. Like you can just feel that pressure, like the inevitability that you're not actually going to hit the goal that you're targeting. And I just wanted to just stay in bed and just give up.
Today I'm talking to DaeWha Kang, a Korean designer, architect and artist based in London. In 2014, he founded DaeWha Kang Design, a studio that creates beauty and timelessness in work ranging from urban design to architecture, from sculpture to interiors. The studio aims to improve well-being through design, and its ethos is summarised in its statement, "Beauty built with wisdom." In fact, I first met DaeWha on the 12th floor of the Shard in London, where he created a work environment to measure the impact of natural materials and shapes on our emotional well-being and productivity. He used bamboo, brass, stone and plants to create a fully immersive workspace, as well as interactive meditation and relaxation pods. I was inspired. His most high-profile projects include the regeneration of a Christopher Wren church, a concert hall in central London, and the Fine Arts Museum in Saudi Arabia. In keeping with his philosophy, his charity, Climate Change, All Change, works in schools to engage children with climate change solutions through co-design. In our conversation, DaeWha shares what it's like to lead a team when none of you know what you're doing, the importance of finding your positive sparks, and what made him get up rather than give up. DaeWha, thank you so much for joining me on the podcast this morning. I'm very, very much looking forward to talking to you.
Yeah, me too. It's so good to see you, Sarah.
Let's get straight into the heart of it. And tell me, DaeWha, how do you experience pressure? Let's start there.
Well, I think pressure is something that's pretty much always with me, I guess, considering I'm running a business. And so I hear it like a kind of ambient, it's like an ambient noise that's part of my everyday life. And sometimes it's so quiet that I don't really hear it so much. I'm not conscious of it, but it's always sort of there. And then there are moments when suddenly it goes by like a fire engine, and then suddenly it becomes the main focus of my attention. But it's definitely something that I've learned to live with, and I think that there are definitely aspects of the pressure that are very positive on my life, and then there are some that really need to be managed as well.
Yeah. I love this idea of an ambient noise. It's like a little sort of friend that sits around you all the time.
Yeah.
Can you remember when you first noticed that ambient noise? I mean, I love the fact that you've got this idea that sometimes it's good and sometimes it's not so good, but can you remember its evolution?
Yeah, I think definitely when I talk about it as something that's always there, I think a lot of pressure for me comes with responsibility or commitment. So obviously, when I was a child, I didn't really have very many responsibilities and I hadn't made very many commitments. And so when I talk about this ambient noise, I think I'm really thinking about the last 8 years running a company and having always a kind of low-level feeling that there's something that I've got to make sure that I'm staying on track with. But I do think that pressure is something that I start to learn from my childhood in small bits, and some of that would come from sport, some of that would come from art and music. So I do remember, for instance, definitely playing competitive tennis when I was younger, that you start to feel that pressure the closer you get to a goal. You're very relaxed when you're kind of at the starting point of a tournament, and then each time as you go along, you think, okay, I'm getting closer and closer to winning this thing, and then you can actually feel you're getting closer to winning a match. And I think at that point, you can really feel pressure amping up. And I think that's really good training for the future when, when you have a working life, that there's that there are many different types of pressure that are more consequential somehow.
Yes.
So I remember a lot of that from my childhood, actually.
Yeah. And when you felt the pressure rise, particularly in sport or art or music, does that same sort of system in the way that you managed it then still kick in for you when the fire engine of the pressure goes by? I mean, is it something you've consciously worked on, or is it something? Tell me more about how you've partnered with that ambience.
Yeah, I think for me, handling the pressure is something that does happen in the moment, but it's not something that I prepare for just at that moment. I think there's a famous story about boxing where they say that champions are made in the gym, not in the ring. And so they say that in those moments of performance or those moments of crisis, that's where all of your preparation essentially pays off. And so for me, handling pressure, it's very much about feeling like I've done everything that I can to be prepared, to have the skills that I need ahead of time. And a lot of this has been about taking on the right amount of pressure that I know that I can handle based on the skills, based on where I am now and the skills that I have. So that's definitely something that I felt that our capacity to carry pressure can continue to increase as we become more and more ready for that, and we feel the desire for all of the benefits that we're getting from actually taking on commitments and responsibilities that lead to this kind of pressure.
Yeah.
So that's one thing that I think is definitely characterized my life.
Yeah, and I really love this point about desire, because the more I talk to people about pressure, more I look into the idea of pressure. It is this sense of sort of betterment and enlivening. That's what excites me about it, is that relationship that pressure can allow you to feel more alive. And I think desire is very much tied into that as well. When the fire engine comes, does the desire fade? How do we hold on to the energy of pressure to allow us to become more alive and really honor the desire that's underneath it, rather than it tipping into it being debilitating or making us smaller, I suppose, and making our commitment shrink?
Yeah, Sarah, I think absolutely perceptive what you're saying. I think we often talk I think in sport we talk about it, and also in creative disciplines, about flow. And
yes.
When I think about the moments, I definitely find times when I'm in a flow, either with my creative output or even in leadership or managing people, managing a team towards a goal. And what I feel is that there is a sort of Goldilocks point with pressure, where when you just feel that edge, you can feel that pressure coming on, and you just know that you're prepared, you have the skills, and it's like a performance that you're just letting yourself really just enjoy a kind of virtuosity in handling this kind of pressure. There are many times when I feel that if often might be something has to be designed or sketched in a very short amount of time. As an architect, I often have these deadlines. And I remember sometimes when the studio was very small, we had very young assistants around and not a lot of experienced staff. And sometimes I would just say, look, let me just show you how I would approach this. And I would kind of perform for the whole team. So I would say, okay, like now I'm sketching, I would talk them through as I'm going. And very, very rapidly, these designs would come to life. And I think there's something amazing about knowing that over years and years of practice that you've created these skills that you can actually employ on demand. And I loved the energy of that and everybody coming together and seeing that. And now that the team is much more experienced and has so many more of their own skills, then feeling that orchestrated as a whole team is really incredible when we had recently a competition that we decided to take on at the last moment, and everybody said, yeah, we're going to go for it. And you just saw all of these people coming together with these incredible skill sets, able to do something in just 3 or 4 days that nobody would believe could actually be achieved. And I think that when you hit that right moment of the combination of pressure, which leads to focus and leads to edge, and I think ability and confidence, then I think you can really feel very alive, as you say.
Yeah. Yes. And also what, I mean, we first met when I saw this extraordinary room that you had designed, I think on the top of one of the offices in the Shard, and how striking it was in terms of its new look and feel of how people could work in an office that was natural and sustainable, and use the sort of natural rhythms of how humans work. And I'm wondering, what part the desire, the sort of almost the purpose in that description that you've just shared around your team, or galvanizing and going towards something that seemed almost impossible in 3 to 4 days, but actually it became a sort of vibrant, it sounds like, team effort to hit the deadline. What part do you think that purpose, that sense of what you as an architect want to do in the world, DaeWha, actually plays in that ability to manage pressure?
Yeah, I think as I said, it comes back to that question of desire. Yeah, and I think we have this a slogan for the studio is beauty built with wisdom. That's what we're trying to do every day with our work. And the expansion of that is that we believe that design can have a real profound and positive impact on the world. And so I think there's a strong sense of purpose in what we're doing. And there's also a big challenge. So there's a lot that we're trying to achieve that's just not very easy. So I think what it means is that the people who've gathered together in the studio as part of the team are all people who have a deep ambition in their hearts to do things that are challenging or new, as you said, that we're not just following the easiest path forward. And so that challenge becomes a kind of galvanizing point to say, look, if we do want to achieve something that's not just run of the mill, we're going to have to work harder. There are going to be more obstacles in our way. And we put that kind of positive pressure on ourselves to say, yeah, how can this be even better? Right. And I think that's a really healthy type of pressure that I think you can feel. But as you say, if you take it too far, it can become very debilitating. So you have to be very careful.
Yeah. And how do you manage that in yourself, DaeWha, that balance between it being a positive pressure or a debilitating pressure?
I think for me, Sara, the most important thing is self-awareness. So in a lot of ways, it's about really being able to hear the rhythm of your own body, of your own mind. I know you talk a lot about that, Sara, where you say we have to be scientists who are experimenting on our own brains constantly. And I think that it's very important to develop that level of self-awareness. I suppose in a way that a really high-performing athlete just knows exactly what's going on in their body all the time. And if they eat this food, then they drink that thing, or if they sleep in a particular way, they can feel it on how it's affecting their performance. I think that if we really want to be pushing ourselves to the edges of the amount of pressure that is healthy for us, it's really important that we're able to identify that line about where, because I think we can all handle more pressure than we think. That's definitely true. And Eduardo, one of my team members, I remember him saying to me, I can actually go extremely far. I can go really hard. I can work like crazy, but it comes at the expense of my motivation. And I think that's a really interesting thing, that we have a bank of energy, we have a bank of willpower inside our bodies and tolerance for difficulty. And I think we just have to be constantly aware how much we're drawing down on that. And make those slight adjustments. So For me, I suppose it's a little bit like just surfing an edge, that
Mm.
I feel like I like to have that feeling that I'm pushing myself all the time. So it means that I'm always looking for exactly the boundary between pushing myself a bit too hard and then just being too relaxed
Yeah.
somehow.
I'm really intrigued with Eduardo's definition there around the impact of going so hard or performing so long that it impacts motivation. I mean, many people talk about it, feeling exhausted and impacting their sense of fatigue.
Hmm.
And I'm really interested in this sense of motivation. It makes so much sense that actually you have a refuel or recovery moment from it in order to reboot your motivation. Let's talk about the practice of self-awareness. If I were to ask you now to check your current bank of energy, how much do you have? What have you done so far today that's meant you've drawn down on it? And what have you done today to top it up? How often do you even stop to check your energy bank? DaeWha talks about surfing his edge and how he's learnt to identify when he crosses the line from healthy pressure into unhealthy pressure. I love how he describes self-awareness as being able to hear the rhythm of your own body and your own mind. If we're not careful, we can inadvertently let the rhythm of doing more drown out our ability to pause and listen to ourselves. And part of becoming better under pressure is to become acutely aware of what makes a difference to our energy. Working out the key ingredients that impact our ability to be our best, particularly under pressure, requires experimentation and practice, a deliberate and ongoing self-inquiry. What are the first signs that tell you that you've crossed this line? Is it fatigue? Is it motivation? Is it lack of focus? When we're under pressure, we can lose sight of our ability to choose. When uncertainty or relentless challenge hits, our dog brain can take hold and we can react rather than choose. We all have the capacity to step away and observe ourselves. If you were to become more of a scientist on your own behaviour, what would you pay more attention to? The more self-aware we become, the more adjustments we can make and we can increase our capacity to handle pressure. Under pressure, our ability to observe ourselves, to notice the impact that pressure is having on us, and then to choose how we respond to it, allows us to be truly free. It's about active awareness, noticing the impact that pressure is having on us and actively choosing what to do. I'm curious, DaeWha, around your journey on understanding yourself, your self-awareness. Can you share what happens to you when you know that you are on the edge in an unhealthy way rather than on the edge into flow state?
Yeah, I can definitely feel it because it's a feeling of slow withdrawal. So you start sort of mentally starting to run away from the pain rather than leading into it. So it's like that, it's that just that soft soreness that comes with really exerting yourself is very healthy. But then I think there's a moment where you're sort of thinking, oh, ouch, and then you start to try and avoid. And I think when you start leaning away rather than leaning in to the pressure, that's when I really know. When I think about some of the most extreme pressures that I felt, I've definitely gone all the way to the limit before, where I really felt like I actually couldn't get back in the ring. And I could tell that this was really at the absolute limit of what somebody could handle.
Yeah.
And that's the moment where I thought, yeah, there is a kind of, I think in the end, there's always a part of us that will, that you can feel that happening, where you're losing your strength to get back in there and keep battling on.
Yeah.
And I think that's a really good indication when you start finding yourself sort of escaping. Yeah.
Yes. And so what do you do when you feel the desire to escape?
I think you have to treat yourself with a lot of consideration, and that's another thing I've learned. Like you have to be able to be compassionate to yourself, to say, yeah, it's okay. Like everybody has a limit. You're actually pushing yourself incredibly hard. So give yourself time. It's a marathon. It's not a sprint. This is there's a long life. There's a long career to be working at, and you really just realize that it might be that you've actually just bit off a little bit more than you can chew. And what I try to do is just give myself a little bit of physical rest, give myself a little bit of mental rest, and then also reframe again. Okay, remind myself why am I here in the first place? What was my purpose? And then just ease back into it, and then re-engage.
Yeah. Do you have a way of just reminding yourself of your purpose, DaeWha?
Yeah, I definitely do. I think it's one of the big benefits about architecture being a collaborative profession. So every Monday morning we have this thing. Since the lockdown, we've had this thing called the Monday meeting where we just sit down, everybody gathers together, and we give updates about all the things that are happening in the studio, every single project, every initiative that's going on. And I think that's a really good practice to make sure that at least once a week, you're really having a chance to look at all the amazing things that we're actually doing. And I think that gives a little bit of distance and perspective, I think, when you're really in the trenches dealing with difficult decisions. Yeah.
So that's so helpful, hearing what you do. You give yourself some, I think you called it physical rest, some mental rest. You take yourself away. Do you have to be on your own to do that? Because I know you've got a family. I mean, what does that mean, physical and mental rest in the moment for you?
If I need to take a break from the actual tasks at work, then I will do that, just no matter what time of day or which day of the week it is. I think definitely spending time resetting. What you find is when you feel more and more pressure, often you start to rush, you start to cut corners, and then suddenly you're adding to the pressure because you're not feeling as strong or healthy as you are. So it's a vicious cycle. So sitting down properly for the meals with the family makes a big difference, and sometimes going out and really exercising a little bit harder. Often I'll go for a run. Often I'll feel the pressure in my gut very much when I start to feel the pressure, and so I start to feel like I'm not digesting my food as well. I can feel kind of like a sort of unsettledness in my torso. And what I found is that if I go and I run, generally it sort of starts to circulate all of my blood through my whole body. It gets the blood out of my head and into other bits, and I can actually feel my gut actually sort of relax and kind of really even just feel lighter in general. So that's been something that's always really helped me a lot as well.
And when you see members of your team hitting the unhealthy pressure versus healthy pressure, how do you spot that, and what do you do as a owner of a growing business?
Well, I think it's definitely the most important thing for me is, again, awareness. So when I was talking before about getting to know yourself, then I think it is really about deeply getting to know your team to the point where you can tell how they're feeling. You can really immediately sense where they are. If you ask me about how are every single member of my team feeling right now, I could probably tell you exactly where they are. And I think that's, again, because we have every morning, Mondays we have longer meetings, but then every morning we have this thing called morning meeting, and then we just check in very briefly. It might be 5 minutes or 10 minutes. And I think it's just those little connections where your purpose is just to get a feeling for what's going on. And I think it's also about understanding how every team member is very different in terms of the way that they handle pressure, the way that they feel motivation. And so there are certain team members who might need to have a little bit more guidance, because they're the kind of people who don't feel their own mental state as easily as they probably might like to. So you often find that these kind of people can handle a lot of pressure and a lot of challenge, and then all of a sudden it all blows up.
Yeah.
Whereas there are other
Yeah.
people who actually can go much further than they think they can, and be totally fine. And so with those team members, you can also say, yeah, let's take it up a notch, and I think you can definitely do this, and give them the confidence to just push a little bit into the danger zone. So I think it is very much about that. But we do have a lot of conversations about face-to-face time versus time over Zoom.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's another thing that I really do believe in, that sometimes time spent in the same room also makes a really big difference to the amount of information that you can get, and to really understand how people are feeling.
Yeah, I suppose you can pick up the signs more readily, can't you, when they're close to you?
Yeah, no, absolutely.
That's what I'm hearing. And I want to go back to that idea of you showing in the early days, sharing your skills. I suppose a lot of this, I'm sitting here thinking, that if I was listening to this, thinking in a massive organization, all of the things you're sharing, this intimacy, it feels very intimate. As you get bigger, often I think that it's hard to hold on to that intimacy, isn't it? Especially as an owner of a business or a CEO of a business. So this idea of you sharing or breaking down something together, I'm intrigued about that in a way, and wondering how you do that as you grow.
Yeah, I think the answer for us so far has been to grow a little bit more slowly, intentionally, because there's a lot of time and effort that we've put into sort of embedding some of our way and embedding our values into the whole team. And so I think that overall, what I feel is that the more that we invest in sort of spending time properly, not just sharing what the decision has been, but what is the process behind decisions, kind of leaning into some of those short-term inefficiencies for the sake of long-term alignment, I think is extremely important for us, because in the end, all you can rely on is your people. And as you get more and more layers of people, I think then you have to rely on not yourself, but everybody around you to have the demeanor, the right process, the right way of thinking, the right set of values. And so I think what we've done in the studio is that we've really prioritized time set aside to invest in that now, so that as we continue to grow in the future, that people will feel aligned, that everybody will kind of know what we stand for. And so I think we put the values number one. So every year, so I've been talking about every day, every week, but we have also every year we have a meeting at the beginning of the year that we call Navigate, and we set kind of our goals for the year, and we reflect on how we've done in the previous year, as every business does. But what we do at those meetings is that we always begin with the same slides that talk about why we exist, what's our purpose, what are the values that underpin who we are in our work, and who we are as people, and how we relate to other people. And I think as the years go by, what we're finding is that the group really has that identity. And so it becomes a very strong culture. And I hope that the team, as they have to manage larger and larger teams themselves, that they'll be able to spread that, in their own way.
So I'm hearing those ingredients as being a foundation to actually managing the pressure that's going to come in with the ambition of the business, that you're laying some strong foundations within the culture of your team, so that high ambition of where you want to go and what you want to do in the world has something to sit very firmly on.
Yes, definitely. Yeah, I think 100% that we're putting our work in the gym right now. That's what I
Yeah.
say.
Interesting. Yeah.
We are in the ring, but
Yeah. Yeah.
we're still spending a huge amount of our effort on the foundations and on our internal abilities rather than just on our outward kind of show. So
Yeah.
yeah, I think it's very important.
Yeah. And DaeWha, how do you really use the future desire that you have in a way that keeps you growing and keeps you learning? So
Mm,
if we take the principle of pressure being an enlivening force and a betterment force, if we can
mm,
keep it in healthy pressure, and the close relationship it has with desire and ambition and what it is that you want to, my word, cause in the
mm.
world, how do you keep that sort of stoked to keep you learning and to keep you growing?
Yeah, I think it's really for me it's about structuring life in a way that constantly gives you reminders about what you're trying to achieve. It's very much about having strong role models who can motivate you to keep pressing yourself forward. I think if it's in terms of professional life, definitely one of the things that's really good is you that everybody has a different set of things that they're focusing on. So even if you're talking about your peers, um, you we might focus more on cultural buildings and public buildings um, and so we're making progress on that front, but we might have another peer who's a good friend who's focusing very much on Arthur, for instance. He's focusing very much on innovation in fabrication, 3D printing, and complex sort of robotic fabrications. So on his side, he's far ahead of where I am on many of those things. Whereas from my side, maybe we've made a lot more buildings. And so I can look at him and I can say, oh yeah, I still need to push more on these material side and innovative side. And then I can look at another friend who might be doing just a much bigger commercial business and think, okay, like there's still a long way for us to go commercially. Um, and I think you can always find it's maybe the positive side of this kind of Instagram culture in a way
Yeah.
that you're always looking at the best side of all the different people around you,
Yeah.
and we just trying to remind yourself that you can just keep up. You know, we always run faster in the race than we do in training, and it's because we see the people around us, yeah, and
Yes.
we're going. And I think it's the same with professional life. And I think with personal goals, I think it is also the same. I think it's about when you think about family or friends, for me, I think it really is about just for me surrounding myself with the people that I respect absolutely the most about how they've maintained those relationships, the kind of relationships that they have, the sort of life that they're leading, and then always kind of holds me to account to say, yeah, I could do that. I could be a little bit more, I could be a little bit more focused on this. I could be more present with my boy or with my wife, with my parents. So
Mm-hmm.
I think it's all about finding those positive sparks around.
Yeah. Positive sparks.
Yeah, I think as much as possible to find people who care about similar things, who have similar goals in life, who respond to the same things. And it's the same when it comes to friendships, but it's also the same when it comes to clients and collaborators and work.
Mm-hmm.
That you know that you want to spend every time that we take on a new project or every time that we start working with a new client, then it opens up an entire new landscape of possibilities with those people. So it's not just one, it's not just one relationship that you take when you say yes. You're saying yes to a whole trajectory.
Yeah.
And so I think that it is very important to choose wisely as much as as much as you can,
Yeah.
and make sure that you're going the way that you want to go.
Yeah. And you sound very clear about the way that you want to go.
As much as possible, yes. I think beauty built with wisdom. I think it's very concise. I think we care about sustainability. We care about social responsibility, of positive impact on people and planet. But we think that it's something that deserves to be done in a beautiful way, and that's what we think we're able to do as really artistic designers. But it doesn't mean that it's. I think the devil is in the detail, I think is the question. And that's where I feel often the most pressure when I can see that there are choices that have to be made where there's no obvious, better path. There's a positive and negative to both, and then you're sort of trying to balance which are the right compromises to make, or which are the right opportunities to take, I think.
And when you're in that sort of choice place, DaeWha, are you somebody that, in order to manage that pressure, you need to think that through on your own? Or do you really value opening that up with others?
I think my wife would really appreciate if I would do more of that on my own. but I'm definitely somebody who likes to consult, and I think I like to talk my way through difficult decisions and difficult challenges. And so I think it's a real pleasure to have also a team around who are interested in that, and then also a lot of friends and mentors around.
Yes.
But yeah, I think it's interesting when you talk about pressure. It's from physics, right? It's the amount of force per unit area is pressure. And obviously, if you can spread the force around onto a larger area, it becomes less pressure. And I think that's probably something that's also very, very much the case with these very pressurized decisions. So if you do have to take the decision completely on your own, I think you feel so much more pressure than if you have the confidence that you've actually, you have an entire group of people who support your decision, that you've consulted, that people have helped you to understand the different facets of the decision more. It's still a lot of pressure if you're the ultimate decision maker, I think.
Yes.
But it's very different from feeling like, the whole process has been only you as well. So I think that's something that's quite important.
Yeah. You did mention earlier on a little bit about when pressure has been unhealthy. But is there a moment that comes to mind where you felt you have really been under the most pressure?
Yeah, definitely. I tell that story quite a lot. So it was the moment when I found religion, actually. Yeah, it was back in the days when I was working with Zaha Hadid, was a very well-known architect at the time, and she was my teacher in America, just when I was finishing my studies. So I came here to work with her when I was in my late 20s. And I was a very inexperienced young architect, but I think she was somebody who could take massive amounts of pressure, more than anybody that I've met so far. And she liked to take risks, and so she would take risks on people all the time. I remember I'd been working for just a little over a year in the studio. I was an architect who had about 2 years of experience total. And one day she came to me and she said, DaeWha, I want you to start working on that project that you're working on with those guys. You need to start leading some projects on your own. Here's something for you to do. And she handed me this thick book, big A3 book. It was like 140 pages long. And that was the brief for the master plan of a brand new city center in Istanbul, Turkey. It was a competition that had to be completed in about 4 weeks for a population of about 120,000 people. All the transportation and all the building designs and everything. And I said, "Oh, that's really great, Zaha. Thanks a lot. Let's have a look." And then after I read this brief, I realized that it's like I had no experience doing urban design, and I had never led a competition before in the studio, and I actually had never led a team before. And this was clearly a project that required a very large team. I just went back a couple of days later and said, yeah, I've been looking at this, and I think it could actually be quite helpful to have another person working with me, so that I've got, you know, a little bit more support. She said, oh yeah, no, there's nobody, everybody's too busy. So yeah, just go for it. You know, like, it's going to be fine. Day after day, then all these team members started appearing at my desk that I had never met before. And I realized that they were recent graduates from the local school in London who also had no working experience, and they also had no experience working in Zaha's office. I was trying to also manage people who had absolutely no idea what they were doing. And every day another one would come, and suddenly I was surrounded by 8 of these people. I went to her again, maybe a week had passed, and I said, I think this is quite serious. We have only 3 weeks left to go. We have to plan an entire city. Because I'd been showing her sketches, and she was like, yeah, these are really interesting sketches. And I said, but no, but it's not just about sketches. Like, we have to actually design the city. And I said, I know you said there's nobody more experienced who can help me, but what about my friend Tyne? He's just sitting over there. He's like clearly not busy at all. Maybe the 2 of us could do it together. No, I think you'll be fine. Like, what? Just keep going. It's all good. And clearly this was her way of just seeing how much pressure she could pile on and how much was I going to carry. And so as we went along, you know, the weeks were going by, and we would show her conceptual sketches, and she said, oh yeah, this is really interesting. And so I knew that from a conceptual point of view that the work that we were doing is really good, but we had no idea what we were doing. So I thought that the way to get a good result in this kind of situation is just to work as many hours as possible. So we would work all night through without sleeping, and then show her something, and then we'd get comments, and then we'd work again for a few more hours, and then we'd all collapse and sleep for a few days. So we were only sleeping every other day, and we were just completely worn out, and we had no idea what we were doing professionally. About a week before the deadline, having just sent some physical model to be 3D printed, and said, okay, Zaha, yeah, so we just printed the model. She said, oh yeah, just remember the model has to be big, because, you know, all of these other famous architects, they're going to come in with models that are 10, 15 meters long. And I said, Zaha, we didn't know that. So I've made a model. It's just about a foot long. I made it small enough so I could carry it in a suitcase on the way to Istanbul. She said, what? And then sort of waved me off. And I was thinking, okay, this is not good. I also knew that the designs were still very conceptual, because we had no technical experience what we were doing. And so finally the day came. We all flew to Istanbul. And as soon as I walked into the hall, I saw that other competitors really did have 50-foot long models, and they had all these real photorealistic cities on the wall, like, you know, just meters and meters of drawings and renderings. And I really thought, oh my God, we're just completely screwed. You know, this is awful. And she was known to be a very volatile person as well. And so I was just there kind of finishing everything up. And then she arrived in the morning. And it was all the Turkish international press, and international press was there, and they were interviewing people on TV. And she was screaming when she looked at it. I've never been so embarrassed in my entire life, and this is ridiculous. I thought, oh my God, this is just the absolute worst. And they went in to present to the juries, and I was sitting in the audience, and I just remember thinking, oh my God, like, I've just completely sabotaged our whole, you know, the whole office. I've let her down. I've let down all these people who've worked like crazy for, you know, the whole, you know, this entire month. And it was really, really low point, actually. I remember, you know, going back to the hotel room and then just like collapsing. Yeah, later I got this call from her saying, you know what, we won the competition. It was because our idea was the best, even if it was really poorly represented. And so, yeah, like, good job, you know. And there was a kind of relief, but actually there was this moment in the process just before, it was after we'd made that physical model. I went home because we'd been working all night. I would just be sleeping at random hours. So it was middle of the day, and I went home after that meeting, and I took a little nap. And I couldn't get out of bed. I physically couldn't get out of bed to go back to the studio. I just thought, like, we're not going to make it. Like, you can just feel that pressure, like the inevitability that you're not actually going to hit the goal that you're targeting. And I just wanted to just stay in bed and just give up. My girlfriend at the time was going to church, so I would go with her occasionally. And so I thought, I found myself actually having this conversation with God, saying, you know what, like this is like the worst situation I've experienced so far. If you get me out of this, I will aim to do good work in the world that will be for you, rather than just for my own personal gain. And so I had this little quiet prayer time, and I found that I managed to get just enough strength to sort of crawl to the finish line and get us to Istanbul, and then ultimately to make it through this process. But it's not a really very extreme situation. It's just a professional situation. It's nothing like living through physical danger. But I think it was definitely a moment where I got to the physical and mental limit of what I could actually take, to the point where I actually couldn't get up anymore and keep fighting. And I think that's a really useful place to inhabit and to see once in your life. But I think be very careful with it, I think. Yeah.
Wow. Such a profound story, DaeWha, and in it, so many little ingredients, actually, about how you lead someone, how you have faith in someone, but without like stretching them to a point where they can't get out of bed. But what I really like is the fact that becomes sort of like, as you just said, when you have an experience like that, that's where you're never going to go again. It gives you a sense of why these habits that you were talking about earlier on become such a crucial part of keeping pressure into healthy pressure and serving in your case, serving a greater good in the world. So desire and self-awareness feel like they're very, very strong protagonists in your ability to make sure that you stay in healthy pressure.
Yeah, 100%. I do think that that was very influential, because I often reflect on, if that had all gone badly, I think if we had lost this competition, if there had been huge amounts of blame, if there had been a really traumatic experience afterwards, I do wonder whether that would have had really long-term effects on my confidence or on my career, because of the mental position, the sort of place where I was mentally. And so I think that's probably tuned me in to understand a little bit better about how far I can push it before it does become kind of existential. And I think it's important. And at the same time, I do think that it's also a testament, as we say, that you can go much further than you thought, and we are capable of much more. But you are drawing down on all kinds of physical, mental, and spiritual reserves, I think, when you do that. Yeah.
I'm sure also you've learned an awful lot about how you lead others under pressure too, with that role model. What you do as a leader to galvanize others, as opposed to putting them under this unhealthy pressure.
I think so. Yeah, I think there's definitely a feeling that it's not necessary to add additional pressure to something where people already feel a great deal of motivation and sort of positive forward energy. So so I think it is very much about a type of leadership that lights the flame, but then leaves enough air around people to really sort of, for them to kind of blaze their own way, I think.
DaeWha's description of leadership is so beautiful that I feel the need to repeat it. A type of leadership that lights the flame, but leaves enough air around it so people can do what they need to blaze in their own way. I love that. We've all had people or bosses in our life who've encouraged us to blaze in our own way, or pushed us to achieve more than we thought we could. I had both a violin teacher and a dance teacher who did just that. They had such a strong influence on me that I knew relatively early on that I wanted to do the same, become a teacher, so I could encourage others in the same way. But in any role where you have influence over others' performance, it's a fine line, or as DaeWha says, we have to surf the edge to work out what is the most useful amount of pressure to apply in order to get the best out of someone. One of the biggest lessons I learned as a teacher was realising that what was positive pressure for one student was unhealthy pressure for another. The skill is judging when to apply it and how to apply it. Yes, we can always go much further than we thought in our ability to handle pressure. However, at what cost? How far can you push or encourage others to achieve more before the pressure on them becomes unhealthy? As he mentions, if they hadn't won that competition, the impact of that experience might have been very different. Remaining self-aware and connecting strongly to desire that's bigger than self-interest are key players in DaeWha's ability to remain in healthy pressure. How do you light the flame in others? And what do you do to leave enough air around it so they can blaze in their own way? What a great segue into the final two questions, DaeWha, about if you were to pass two things forward to anyone listening to this who would like to be better under pressure and turn it into an enlivening force, an energy that makes them come alive, what would you offer?
I would definitely say invest in your own self-awareness. So whatever form that might take, and whatever practice you might take on to do that, I think that it's one of the most important things to handle pressure is to know yourself. And the second is also to really put in those hours in your gym before you put yourselves constantly in the ring, because I think it's really about, I think, preparation for me and real confidence in like true ability, that I can trust my abilities because of all the time that I've put in. That helps me to handle that, and I think that's the magic recipe. Yeah, so agree. It's wonderful then, because those skills kick in, don't they, automatically, because you've done your drilling of them. Thank you so much, DaeWha. It's been a fascinating conversation, and your work is very inspiring, so it's lovely to have you on. Thank you. Thank you so much, Sara. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of Better Under Pressure with me, Sara Milne Rowe. If you enjoyed it, please do subscribe and let us know what you found useful or what you'd like to know more about. Our aim is to share as many examples as possible of what people do to manage pressure for better. If you're interested in any of the practices mentioned, check out my book, The Shed Method. Alternatively, you can find us at Coaching Impact or me on LinkedIn and Instagram. Better Under Pressure was produced by the fab team at Smart Cookie Media. Thanks so much for listening, and until next time, goodbye.